Chapter 6. It was proving to be an eventful afternoon. Because Miss Boone handled a lot of divorces and was always on the side of the wife, the office was occasionally the scene of some bad family drama. Just as the dust had settled in Theo's office, and as Mr. Boone was heading towards the conference room to call the police, there were loud voices near the front door. An angry man and a shrieking woman were having a spat, and it quickly led to a confrontation. The woman was Miss Treen, a new Boone and Boone divorce client, and the man was her husband, Mr. Treen. They had a house full of kids and a world of problems, and Miss Boone had been trying to convince them to undergo marriage counseling instead of going the divorce route. According to Miss Treen, her husband had become violent and abusive and impossible to be around. He certainly appeared to be violent as he stood by Elsa's desk and growled at his wife. "You are not filing for divorce over my dead body." He was a thick, stout man with a beard and eyes that flashed when he spoke. Miss Boone, Elsa, and Theo entered the reception area and stopped to watch. Mr. Boone took a step forward and said, "Let's take a deep breath here and try to be civilized." Miss Treen eased away and stood close to Miss Boone. Elsa and Theo stayed in the background, all eyes and ears. "I can't live with you," Miss Treen said. "I'm tired of getting punched and slapped around. I'm taking the kids and leaving." "Taking the kids and leaving, Roger, and there's nothing you can do about it." "I'd never hit you," he replied, though no one believed this. Mr. Treen had a look of a brawler who might slap just about anyone. "Stop lying, Roger," CA said. "Perhaps we should step into my office," Miss Boone said calmly. "He's got a gun," Miss Treen said, and all spines stiffened. "It's in his pocket." All eyes went straight to the pockets of Mr. Treen's pants, and sure enough, there appeared to be something dangerous there. "Get in the car, Karen," Mr. Treen said, with eyes glowing and jaw muscles clenching. No one with any sense would get in the car with this guy. "No," she replied. "I'm not taking orders from you anymore." "I'll ask you to leave," Mr. Boone said firmly. Mr. Treen smiled, touched his right pocket, and said, "Maybe I don't want to leave." "Then I'll call the police," Mr. Boone said. There was a long pause. No one moved. Finally, Miss Boone said, "I have an idea. Let's step into the conference room, just for us, and get some coffee and have a conversation." Because he negotiated divorce settlements and spent a lot of time in the courtroom, Mrs. Boone understood the need for a compromise. Her soft voice and even temper drained some of the tension. It was a standoff. Mr. Treen was not leaving. Mrs. Treen was not leaving with him, and no one wanted to provoke the guy with the gun. Mr. Treen blinked first, and in doing so, kept the situation from getting worse. He said, "Okay, let's talk." Also quickly added, "I'll get the coffee." The Treens and the Boones stepped into the conference room and closed the doors. At first, Theo and Elsa were not sure if they should call the police or wait on Mr. Boone. Theo was worried about his parents being in there with a somewhat agitated and emotional man who was unstable enough to carry a pistol in his pocket. What if things took a turn for the worse? What if they suddenly heard gunfire popping in the conference room? Theo wanted to call the police immediately. Elsa, though, had a different approach. Mr. Treen had agreed to talk peacefully about their problems. If the police showed up and arrested him on some weapon charge, then he might go off the deep end and do something crazier the next time. Elsa was confident her bosses could defuse the situation and perhaps make progress in settling some of Treen's issues. Elsa called a glass repairman who advertised his 24-hour service. Minutes passed with no gunfire from the conference room, nor were there loud, angry voices. Theo settled down somewhat, though given the events of that day, he was still unnerved. He and Elsa decided to take photos of the office and show the police later. They swept up the glass and saved the rock for evidence. The repairman arrived after dark and began replacing the broken panes. Usually on Tuesday nights, the Boones left their offices and walked a few blocks to the Highland Street shelter, where they served food to the homeless and helped in other ways. Mrs. Boone, along with 3 other female attorneys in Strattonburg, had started a small free legal clinic for abused women, several of whom were homeless and stayed in shelter. Mr. Boone saw clients there too, typically folks who had been wrongfully evicted from their homes and apartments, and people who had been denied benefits. Theo's job was to help the homeless children with their studies. The meeting and the latrines gave every indication of lasting forever. So Theo decided to go to the shelter alone. His parents would catch up later, if for no other reason than to have dinner. After they served the homeless, they always had a quick bowl of soup or sandwich before dispensing legal advice. Theo was starving and tired of the office. He said goodbyes to Elsa and rode his bike to the shelter. He was too late for dinner, but found leftovers in the kitchen. His current project was teaching math to the Kobach boys. Russ was 8 and Ben was 7, and they had been living in the shelter for their mother for the past 2 months. Miss Boone was handling the legal matters for Miss Kobach, and though Theo did not know the details, he did know the little family was reeling from some type of tragedy. Mr. Kobach had been killed in a faraway place and in a manner that was not being discussed. After he died, the family lost everything, and they had lived in an old truck for several weeks before finding beds at the shelter. For Theo's Eagle Scout project, he was planning to organize a program in which teenage volunteers who were old enough to drive would adopt a homeless kid, sort of like Big Brother, Big Sisters. He was also thinking about building another shelter, one that would house homeless people who were still living in tents and under bridges. However, his father had warned him that such a project would cost millions. As usual, the Kobach boys were subdued, even shy. Their young lives had been filled with turmoil and misery. Mrs. Boone said that they were damaged and needing counseling. Theo managed to coax a few smiles as they plowed through the math workbooks. Their mother sat nearby, watching, and, as Theo suspected, trying to learn math too. Theo knew she could not read well. Each visit to the shelter reminded Theo of how fortunate he was. Only half a mile from his warm, secure environment, there were people like the Kobachs living on cots in a shelter and eating food donated by churches and charities. Theo's future was fairly predictable. If all went according to plan, he would finish high school, go to college, he had not decided where, then on to law school to become a lawyer. The Kobach boys, on the other hand, had no idea where they would be living in a year. Highland Street allowed its friends to stay for 12 months only, during which time they were expected to find a job and a more permanent place to live. So, like everyone else, the Kobachs were just passing through. At 9 p.m., all volunteers checked out of the shelter. Theo said goodbye to Ben, Russ, and their mother, and left the basement. There was no sign of his parents, so he decided to bike back to the office to get his backpack and his dog, and hopefully find everyone still alive. There was almost no traffic at that hour, and Theo darted through the streets with little regard for the rules of the road. He jumped curbs, dashed along sidewalks, ran stop signs, and ran along the way, reminding himself of how nice it was to have 2 fully inflated tires. At the corner of Main and Farley, a red light had 2 cars waiting in front of Theo, so he swerved to the sidewalk. As he was executing a rather risky sliding turn onto Main, he slid into another bike, one being ridden by a uniformed policeman, Officer Stu Pickenpaw, a lean, gray-haired veteran who'd been patrolling downtown Strattonburg for decades. Every kid in town knew him and tried to avoid him. Theo bounced up unhurt and brushed the dirt off his legs. "Sorry about that," he said, half expecting to be arrested and hauled away to the police station. Officer Peckinpah leaned his bike against the signpost and removed his helmet. What's your name, kid? He demanded as if Theo might be a serial killer. Theo Boone. The two had met several times over the years, at least in passing. This, though, was Theo's first real run-in with Officer Stu. That name's familiar, he said, and gave Theo the opening he always wanted. Yes, sir. My dad is Woods Boone. My mother is Marcella Boone, the law firm of Boone and Boone. Rings a bell. So if both parents are lawyers, then you should know the law, right? I guess. City code prohibits bikes on sidewalks at all hours of the day and night, no exceptions. Don't you know this? Yes, sir, I do. Peckinpah glared at Thea as if he might whip out the old handcuffs and slap both wrists together. Are you okay? Yes, sir. Then get home and stay off the sidewalks. Yes, sir, thanks. Officer Stu had a reputation of having a loud bark but no bite, and he rarely wrote tickets to kids on bikes. He liked to yell and threaten, but preferred to avoid the paperwork. Theo sped away, greatly relieved to be out of trouble, but also curious about what else might happen on this eventful day. His cell phone beeped and he stopped to answer it. It was his mother, telling him to head home. The meeting with the Treens was finally over, and it had been a success. His parents were eating a frozen pizza when he walked into the kitchen. They were exhausted. They asked about the shelter, but were almost too tired to talk. Theo was curious about the Treens and what happened after he left, but the old attorney-client shield was quickly thrown up and the conversation was cut off. His parents never talked about their clients. Never. A client's business and the conversations between lawyers and their clients were strictly off limits. Miss Boone did say an agreement had been reached, and the Treens would seek counseling. Theo had a lot of things to discuss. 2 punctured tires, a vandalized school locker, now a rock through his office window. Someone was tormenting him, and he needed to talk. But it would be a long conversation, and all the Boones, including Judge, were ready for bed. His father, a lawyer who usually avoided a conflict, seemed especially fatigued by the 3-hour ordeal with the Treens. Mrs. Boone was complaining of a headache. Theo was about to press on anyway because he needed help and advice, but just as he was about to say something, the phone rang. It was Mrs. Treen, upset again. Theo and Judge went upstairs to bed. That's the end of chapter 6.